Okay, it's Dr. Ron England here, and this is part 3 of the Pyramath game, and I'm going to kind of go through. There was a question on part 2 because I kind of glossed over it because I had other videos that showed how to do this. But how did you create the droppable and the draggable? Well, the droppable um, was and we actually designated that. Well, let's see, I'm trying to remember. Okay, the droppable items were the divs where we were going to drop the things. So the way we did that was we created those. Those were, in fact, let me just scroll up here so you can see it. When I created those, and I still got the original way that I created it, where we set the div that's going to be the drop targets, and they have the class of drop. So coming down here in the init, which is a function that will initialize, and right here, I should have kind of left that at the top, but I'm going to refactor the code. I want to go through some code refactoring, which is an important thing to learn, so it's why I cover it. But I have this function in it, which in the jQuery is going to initialize it's going to be actually executed on initialization. So the jQuery selector of .drop is going to select everything that has the class drop, which I just, by the way, showed you that all those div targets are going to have the class drop. Sets it to droppable, and droppable actually has properties that can be set. And the most important one of these is the drop property, which is set to handle drop event, which is a function that handles the drop event, which takes 2 arguments, event and UI. I'm not going to go over all that because you can easily look into the documentation for jQuery and jQueryUI and pull up the importance of what those things are. But for the most part, they're going to be, well, especially the UI, because it's going to be able to specify the items that are being dropped. So in other words, the draggable, which is the card, which is getting dropped onto the drop target, is accessible through the UI property, or not property, it's actually a variable, and as the draggable. So, and the droppable and the handle, the drop event is the this element here. You can get that from the documentation, and I've got a bunch of other videos that go over all this. So I'm not going to belabor it. I'm going to get kind of back down to the nuts and bolts of what I'm doing. But it is, I guess, since people ask questions, how did I do that? There you go. So when the draggable item is dropped onto the droppable spot, which by the way is defined here as anything that has the class drop. I actually could call the class droppable too. I can use the same name, but I kind of do like to avoid any potential for naming collisions, even though there wouldn't be one in this case. So we get the card value, we get the drop ID. I'm going to kind of go quickly into is legal. So the logic, the real business logic of the game is all right here in the function is legal, which basically says, hey, do you drop it on something you can't drop it on? And if you did drop it on something you can drop it on, is it allowable? Can you actually play this card on this location? And that's just business logic. It looks to see if the math facts that go with the cards above are being met. So it's that simple. And if not, it returns a false. And if true, it returns a true. I mean, that's a pretty good piece of, I could refactor this down probably more, but why? It makes perfect sense the way it is. So if it's legal, then it will drop the card, and go over to drop card. And I actually have gone through the drop card function. The drop card gets the div of where you're dropping it. It sets the inner HTML to be equal to the image of the card, and it removes the card itself, the draggable item. It removes it from the interface, from the document object model completely. So then it just checks to see if the drop ID is equal to 51, which would be the final piece of the pyramid. And if it's so, it says, congratulations, you completed the pyramid in X number of seconds. That makes for the game. So then when you get into the gameplay, you now have this, boom, there's the first ones that set up. You deal the card, it's a 7, 5 plus 2 is 7, booyah. And I could go through the entire game but I will actually pause. And now I've completed the pyramid, and I just went through and played it. Well, I didn't want to have you watching me do the whole playing, but then you just have the completed pyramid in 105 seconds. We'll jump right back over to that. The code where it comes down and does that on the handle drop event. And here I could probably also refactor that out. Now what we'll do next is I'm going to go through some refactoring from the original functions that I have here and show how some of those can be simplified, and also a little bit of change in the gameplay. So the gameplay itself will actually lay out all of the 10 cards, and every time you move a card into place, it'll replace the card in the spot where you pick it up and add it to the drag location. But as you can see, it's a full-fledged game with all the pieces put into place. If you got any questions on this one, I do try to check, especially for the ones I do for classes, because this is actually to support a class. I do try to answer the questions that might go with it. I've also got some remnants left over from different directions I had gone in the coding, and I do have some scaffolding of the coding still left in that I can remove now. So I'm not going to do all that on camera because it's just going to be a long, boring segment of you watching me code, but I will go through and describe how the final version works and all the refactoring that I've done. Thank you very much. I tried to keep this nice and short. Good programming.